You've probably found yourself in situations where you're waiting for something, for someone, for a sign, for a breakthrough. But what if this waiting isn't a mistake or a delay? What if it's a deliberate part of your spiritual journey? Sometimes, the most transformative moments in our lives happen while we wait, not after we're done waiting. Think about that for a second. This is the first test that we must all pass, the test of waiting. And I'm not just talking about waiting in line for your morning coffee or waiting for your phone to load a video. This is something deeper, more profound. In life, especially when you feel called to something greater, God, the universe, or whatever higher power you believe in, has a way of making you wait. You might feel like you're ready for the next step, the next chapter. But then there's silence. Nothing happens. And it drives you insane, right?
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound spiritual lessons.
But here's the thing, waiting is not wasted time. It's not a punishment. It's preparation. Think of it like this: a sculptor doesn't rush to chisel a masterpiece. Every tap of the hammer, every chip of the stone is deliberate. The waiting is part of the shaping. In the same way, we're being shaped, refined, and prepared for something we can't even see yet. But why? Why do we need to wait? Why doesn't the universe just give us what we want when we want it? Well, think back to moments when you were impatient, when you rushed into something without thinking it through. Did it ever really work out the way you hoped? Probably not, because waiting teaches us patience, and patience teaches us trust. When we wait, we're forced to trust that something greater than ourselves is at work, even if we can't see it. And that's the real test. Can you trust in the silence? Can you believe that the wait is part of the plan? Imagine yourself as a seed planted in the ground. You can't see the sun from where you are. You can't feel the wind. But the soil is nourishing you, even when you feel buried. Your roots are growing deeper, even though all you feel is darkness. And one day, when the time is right, you'll break through the surface. But only if you've endured the waiting. Only if you've trusted the process. So I ask you, how are you waiting right now? Are you waiting anxiously, always checking your watch, always questioning why things aren't happening faster? Or are you waiting with trust, knowing that the timing isn't up to you? Can you give up your need for control and simply trust that what's meant for you will come, but only when you're ready for it? And that brings us to the next layer of this test. Can you remain faithful in the waiting? When it feels like nothing is happening, when you're tempted to give up, can you still hold on to your faith? Faith is not about having all the answers. It's about trusting even when the answers seem far away. It's about believing that the God who started the work in you will finish it, but only if you wait. Let's take it deeper. You're waiting, and then suddenly you find yourself alone. Not just physically alone, but emotionally, spiritually. The people who used to be your support system seem distant. The things that used to bring you comfort feel empty. Why does that happen? Because the second test on this journey is the test of isolation. Now, this might sound scary. No one wants to be alone, right? We crave connection. But isolation is one of the most powerful tools for spiritual growth. When you're isolated, when you're stripped of all the noise and distractions, you're forced to face yourself. And that's where the real work begins. But why does God or the universe isolate us? Because in isolation, we're no longer influenced by the opinions of others. We're no longer swayed by the noise of the world. We're left with nothing but our own thoughts and the voice of the divine. And in that silence, we learn things about ourselves that we could never learn in the crowd. Think about it when you're surrounded by people. It's easy to play a role, to wear a mask. But when you're alone, you have no one to impress. You have no one to hide from. You're just you. And that's where the transformation happens. Moses had to go into the wilderness for 40 years before he could lead his people out of Egypt. Jesus spent 40 days in the desert before starting his ministry. Why? Because isolation is a time of preparation. It's time for refining. In the wilderness, we are stripped of our ego, our pride, our need for validation from others. We're forced to confront our fears, our doubts, our insecurities. And only when we face those things can we truly step into our calling. So I ask you, how are you handling your seasons of isolation? Are you trying to escape them? Are you filling the silence with distractions, with noise, with anything that will keep you from facing yourself? Or are you embracing solitude, knowing that it's a gift, a time of preparation? Can you be okay with being alone, knowing that the isolation is part of your transformation? In isolation, we learn to hear the voice of the divine more clearly. It's in the silence that we discover who we really are. But most of us are afraid of that silence. We're afraid of what we might find if we're left alone with our thoughts. But here's the truth: the things you're afraid to confront are the very things that are holding you back from becoming who you're meant to be. So instead of running from the silence, lean into it. Embrace it. See it as an invitation to go deeper, to discover parts of yourself that you've been avoiding. And remember, isolation doesn't last forever. It's a season, not a sentence. Just like winter eventually gives way to spring, your time in the wilderness will come to an end. But only if you learn the lessons that isolation is trying to teach you. Now, after the waiting and after the isolation, the third test comes: opposition. You see, once you've been refined in the waiting and stripped in the isolation, you're ready to step into your purpose. But the moment you start walking in your purpose, you will face opposition. It's inevitable. Why? Because anything worth doing will be met with resistance. But here's the real question: how do you handle opposition? When people criticize you, when they doubt you, when they actively try to stop you, how do you respond? Do you retreat? Do you give up? Or do you press on? Opposition is a test of your resilience. It's a test of your determination. It's easy to say you believe in something when no one is challenging you. But what happens when the pressure is on? What happens when people are actively working against you? Do you stay the course, or do you crumble? Think about this: every great person in history has faced opposition. Moses faced the stubbornness of the Israelites. Jesus faced the Pharisees. Gandhi faced the British Empire. Martin Luther King Jr. faced systemic racism. They all faced intense opposition, but they didn't give up. They knew that the opposition wasn't a sign that they were on the wrong path. It was a sign that they were on the right one. Opposition forces you to dig deeper. It forces you to ask yourself, how badly do I want this? How committed am I to my purpose? When people are against me, will I still stand for what I believe in? That's the real test. So I ask you, how do you handle opposition in your life? Do you see it as a setback, or do you see it as an opportunity to grow stronger? When people criticize you, do you let it derail you, or do you use it as fuel to keep going? Your response to opposition will determine how far you go on this journey. Because the truth is, if you can't handle opposition, you're not ready for success. If you can't stand firm in the face of criticism, you're not ready to lead. Opposition is not something to be feared. It's something to be embraced. It's a sign that you're moving in the right direction. And the more opposition you face, the stronger you become. So the next time you face resistance, don't see it as a roadblock. See it as a stepping stone. See it as a test that you're ready to pass. What's happening in your life right now? Are you in the waiting, the isolation, or facing opposition? What is this season trying to teach you? Can you see the divine purpose in it? Imagine this scenario: you're at the edge of what seems like an insurmountable obstacle. Everything around you feels heavy, almost unbearable. You've prayed, meditated, sought answers, and yet nothing seems to change. The walls are closing in, and you feel powerless. This is the test of impossible situations, the fourth spiritual test, and it's one of the hardest to endure. But here's the truth: impossible situations are not there to break you. They're there to teach you something profound about surrender and trust. Let me ask you this: what do you do when you've exhausted all your options? When your intellect, your strength, and even your willpower have reached their limit, how do you respond? Do you panic? Do you give up? Or do you finally let go and trust in something beyond yourself? This test is about surrender, true surrender. Not the kind of surrender where you give up in defeat, but the kind where you release your need for control and trust in a higher power. It's about coming to the realization that not everything is within your hands, and that's okay. In fact, it's the way it's supposed to be. You see, we often think that if we try hard enough, if we push long enough, we can make things happen the way we want. But what about the things that are out of our control? What about the moments when life throws something at us that we can't handle on our own? This is where the real spiritual growth happens. In impossible situations, you're forced to confront your own limits. You're forced to admit that you can't do it all by yourself. And in that moment, when you come face to face with your own humanity, you have a choice. You can either fall into despair, or you can surrender to divine timing and trust that everything is unfolding exactly as it should. Take a moment to think about this. What if the impossible situation you're facing isn't a barrier, but a door? A door that can only be opened through surrender. By letting go of your need to control the outcome, you allow the universe to work in ways that you couldn't have imagined. But here's the catch: letting go is terrifying, isn't it? It feels like falling, like losing your grip on reality. But what if falling is exactly what you need? What if falling is actually flying, but you've been too afraid to let go of the ground? I want you to think about the story of Abraham. God promised him that he would be the father of many nations, but years went by, and he and his wife Sarah were still childless. It seemed impossible. Sarah was far beyond the age of childbearing, and all logic and reason said that this promise couldn't be fulfilled. But that's the thing about divine timing: it doesn't operate on human logic. It doesn't follow our schedules or our plans. It operates on a higher level, one that we often can't understand in the moment. When Sarah finally gave birth to Isaac, it wasn't just a miracle of life. It was a lesson in trust, in surrendering to the unknown. Abraham and Sarah had to face the impossibility of their situation and still believe that what was promised would come to pass. And it did, but only after they surrendered their timeline to God's. So I ask you, what impossible situation are you facing right now? And how are you responding to it? Are you fighting it, trying to force a solution? Or are you surrendering, trusting that there's a higher plan at work, even if you can't see it yet? The test of impossible situations is not about finding a solution. It's about learning to be okay without one. It's about learning to live in the tension of uncertainty and still have faith. It's about standing at the edge of the unknown and saying, I don't know how this will work out, but I trust that it will. That's the power of surrender. And let me tell you something, when you truly surrender, when you stop trying to control the outcome, that's when the miracle happens. That's when doors you never thought possible begin to open. That's when the impossible becomes possible. But only if you let go. So, let me ask you again, what are you holding on to right now that you need to release? What situation in your life feels impossible, and how can you surrender it to a higher power? Because until you do, you'll remain stuck in the cycle of frustration and fear. But the moment you let go, the moment you trust in divine timing, everything changes. Now, let's move to the next test, a test that digs even deeper into who you truly are. This is the test of integrity, and it's one of the most revealing tests on the spiritual journey. Integrity isn't about being good when everyone's watching. It's about who you are when no one is around. It's about the choices you make in the dark, in the quiet moments when no one will ever know what you did. So here's the question, who are you when no one is watching? This test is about alignment, about making sure that your actions are in line with your values, even when there's no immediate reward for doing so. It's easy to do the right thing when there's recognition involved, when people are praising you, or when it benefits you in some way. But what about when there's nothing to gain? What about when doing the right thing actually costs you something? In those moments, your integrity is put to the test. It's in those moments that the universe is watching, not just to see if you'll pass or fail, but to see if you're ready for the next level of spiritual growth. Because here's the truth, if you can't be trusted with the small things, you won't be trusted with the big things. If you can't be faithful in secret, you won't be given responsibility in the open. Think about Joseph in the Bible. He was sold into slavery by his brothers, falsely accused, and thrown into prison. For years, it seemed like his life was going nowhere. But Joseph remained faithful. He continued to do the right thing, even when there was no reward in sight. And because of his integrity, he was eventually elevated to a position of great power. But it didn't happen overnight. It was his years of quiet faithfulness that prepared him for the responsibility of leadership. So I ask you, how are you handling the small tests of integrity in your life? Are you cutting corners when no one's looking? Are you compromising your values for the sake of convenience or comfort? Or are you staying true to who you are, even when it's hard, even when it costs you something? The test of integrity is about proving that you can be trusted not just by others, but by yourself and by the universe. It's about showing that you are who you say you are, even when no one is watching. Because in the end, the only person you truly have to answer to is yourself and your higher power. But here's the catch, integrity is not about being perfect. It's not about never making mistakes. It's about being honest with yourself when you do. It's about owning up to your failures, learning from them, and striving to do better. It's about living in alignment with your values, even when it's inconvenient, even when it's uncomfortable. So, take a moment to reflect, where in your life are you being tested in your integrity? And how are you responding? Are you making decisions that align with your highest self, or are you compromising for the sake of ease or approval? Because here's the thing, every decision you make in secret shapes who you become in public. Every choice you make, no matter how small, is a step toward becoming the person you're meant to be, or a step away from it. The test of integrity is not about perfection. It's about progress. It's about choosing to live in alignment with your values, even when it's hard, even when no one's watching. Because in the end, that's what will determine your character and your destiny. Now, after the tests of waiting, isolation, impossible situations, and integrity, we come to the test of criticism. This is a test that every chosen one must face, and it's one of the most painful. Why? Because it involves judgment from others. It involves people questioning you, doubting you, and sometimes even attacking you for following your path. But here's the truth. Criticism is inevitable, especially when you're walking a path that others don't understand. When you're stepping into your purpose, when you're doing something great, there will always be people who criticize you. So here's the question, how do you respond to criticism? Do you let it shake you? Do you let it make you doubt your calling? Or do you stand firm, knowing that criticism is just another test of your resolve? You see, criticism is not about you. It's about the person who's giving it. People criticize what they don't understand. They criticize what makes them uncomfortable. And often, they criticize because they see something in you that they lack in themselves. But here's the thing, their criticism doesn't define you. Your response to it does. So how are you handling the criticism in your life? Are you letting it derail you, or are you using it as fuel to keep going? Because the truth is, if you're not being criticized, you're probably not doing anything worth noticing. Criticism is a sign that you're on the right path. It's a sign that you're stepping into something bigger than yourself. So I ask you again, how do you respond to criticism? Do you let it make you doubt your path, or do you use it as confirmation that you're exactly where you're supposed to be? Now, we've journeyed through the tests of waiting, isolation, impossible situations, integrity, and criticism. But there's one final test that stands before you, and it's perhaps the most deceptive of them all, the test of success. You see, most people think that the hardest part of the spiritual journey is climbing the mountain. They think that the trials, the struggles, the tests of faith are the greatest challenges. And in many ways they are. But what happens when you reach the top? What happens when you finally achieve the success you've been working toward? That's when the real test begins. Success can be incredibly dangerous if you're not prepared for it. It's like fire. It can warm you, illuminate your path, and give you great power. But it can also burn you, consume you, and destroy everything you've built if you're not careful. Why? Because success has a way of revealing your true character. It's easy to be humble, patient, and grounded when you're struggling, when you're still climbing the ladder. But what happens when you're standing at the top, when people are praising you, when your dreams are finally coming true? That's when pride sneaks in. That's when you start to believe that you've made it on your own, that you no longer need to rely on the higher power that got you there. But here's the truth, success is not the destination. It's a continuation of the journey. And if you're not careful, success can lead you off the path just as easily as failure can. So here's the question, how will you handle success when it comes? Will you stay grounded, or will you let it inflate your ego? Will you remember that your success is a gift, a blessing, an opportunity to serve others, or will you start to believe that it's all because of you? Think about King Saul in the Bible. He was chosen by God to be Israel's first king, and he started out humble, unsure of himself, leaning on God for guidance. But as he experienced success, as he gained power, he became prideful. He started to make decisions based on his own desires instead of God's will. And that pride ultimately led to his downfall. Saul's success revealed the cracks in his character, and those cracks eventually consumed him. On the other hand, think about King David. He also experienced incredible success, but he remained humble. He never forgot that his victories, his achievements, were not his alone. He always gave credit to God, always remembered that his success was part of a larger purpose. That's why David was known as a man after God's own heart, because even in the midst of great success, he remained grounded. So I ask you, how are you preparing for success? Are you building the kind of character that can sustain it? Because here's the thing, success is not just about what you achieve, it's about who you become in the process. If you don't cultivate humility, gratitude, and a servant's heart along the way, success will corrupt you. It will turn you inward, make you self-centered, and ultimately lead to your downfall. But if you remain humble, if you remember that your success is not just for you, but for the greater good, then success can elevate you. It can be a tool for greater impact, greater service, and greater spiritual growth. So how do you stay humble in the face of success? Here's a truth I want you to hold on to. Success is not about you. It's not about your talent, your intelligence, or your hard work. Yes, those things matter, but they are not the ultimate source of your success. Your success is a gift. It's an opportunity given to you by something greater than yourself. And with that gift comes responsibility, the responsibility to use your success to serve others, to uplift those around you, to contribute to something greater than your own personal gain. Think about it this way: when a tree grows tall and strong, it doesn't hoard its fruit for itself. It produces fruit so that others can be nourished. In the same way, your success is not meant to be hoarded. It's meant to be shared. It's meant to be used to bless others, to build a better world, to advance a higher purpose. So when success comes, don't let it puff you up. Don't let it make you forget the journey that brought you here. Instead, let it deepen your gratitude. Let it make you even more aware of the people who helped you along the way, the challenges that shaped you, and the higher power that sustained you. Let success make you more generous, more compassionate, more committed to serving others. But here's the tricky part: success can be subtle in the way it tests you. It doesn't always come in the form of fame, wealth, or accolades. Sometimes, success is simply achieving a goal you've been working toward for years. It's the quiet satisfaction of knowing you've accomplished something meaningful. And even in those moments, pride can sneak in. So I ask you again, how will you handle success, no matter how big or small it looks in your life? Will you stay grounded in humility, or will you let success pull you away from your values, your purpose, and your spiritual path? The path of the chosen one is not easy. It's filled with challenges, tests, and moments of deep self-reflection. But every test you face is shaping you, refining you, and preparing you for something greater. Every challenge is an opportunity to grow, to learn, and to deepen your connection to your higher purpose. So, I leave you with this: embrace the journey. Embrace the tests. Whether you're waiting, isolated, facing the impossible, or standing in the midst of success, know that every step is part of a divine plan. Trust the process, trust the timing, and most importantly, trust yourself. You are being shaped into the person you are meant to be, a person of strength, integrity, and purpose. A chosen one. Thank you for walking this path with me. Stay humble, stay grounded, and keep your heart open to the lessons that life is teaching you. Because you are exactly where you're meant to be.